White churches have not just been supported by white supremacy, they have served as its headquarters. I know you don't want to hear that. They have taught white people that oppression is godly and that power belongs to us by divine right. After the civil rights movement, powerful white people, men, saw that their grip was slipping. Black people were winning court cases. Poor people were organizing. Women were demanding rights. How dare we? LGBTQ people were coming out of their closets, and the foundations of white male dominance were cracking. So they thought, what can we use that no one will question? In 1979, Jerry Falwell founded the Moral Majority. He said it was about championing family values. That was a lie. The real trigger was that the IRS had begun revoking tax exemptions for whites-only Christian schools. Those whites-only schools were created specifically to avoid integration. Falwell's own school, Liberty Christian Academy, was one of them. The platform of the Moral Majority ended up getting built around the issue of abortion. Although that wasn't the original plan, they basically test drove different topics to see which ones would resonate the most with the audience they needed to capture, which was white Americans, white Christian Americans. It had everything to do with maintaining the right to discriminate, yet still enjoy government benefits. This guy named Paul Whyte, who was a conservative political strategist, he teamed up with Falwell to build a political base. He admitted that abortion had not really motivated white evangelicals until it became politically useful. Their real grievance was losing control over who could sit in their classrooms, walk into their churches, and live in their neighborhoods. Once they realized that abortion could mask their racial panic, they made that their headline issue. They built a movement that turned pulpits into propaganda platforms. Sunday services became political strategy sessions. That's illegal. You're not supposed to be able to do that at a church if you're getting tax exemption. Ministers told white families that their enemies were not the wealthy elites exploiting their labor. They were not the politicians cutting their wages and stealing their pensions. The churches pointed to the poor, the black, the brown, the queer, the immigrant. Those people are the ones that are taking food out of your children's plate. They told white people they were being persecuted every time they were asked to share. And yes, I understand what it means for me to say this out loud. I know what it means to say that the church, something which is so sacred to so many, has been a central engine of the immoral institution of white supremacy. I know this will upset people. The white church has stood on the wrong side of every fight for justice in this country. Every one. During slavery, it defended human ownership. During Jim Crow, it defended lynching and segregation. Christian church members attended lynchings and brought their children to steep them in that evil. During the civil rights movement, it defended denying benefits to black people. During the rise of Trump, it defended cruelty in the name of religious liberty, as if Trump has a clue. Some churches resisted, yes. There are liberal churches who have a strong history of being on the right side of these issues, but most didn't. Most chose comfort. Even now, white churches help elect leaders who lie, steal, incite violence. They wage war on education. They call justice wokeness as an insult. They are consuming a message that keeps them at the center with the elite in their minds. They choose white power over compassion, over empathy. One share shows you care about setting the record straight. Please share. Next time, I am going to talk about how Donald Trump did not hijack this system. He was groomed into it.
Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, Africans. I hope you're faring well where you are, and if you ain't faring well, please fare well where you are. I have some statistics to share with you. Do you know there's a time when the whole world believed that the earth was flat? Yes, there's a time when the whole world believed that way. And that by that time, science itself did not exist. Science as we know it is like a philosophical doctrine, a doctrine that was developed after philosophy came first. So science is always a branch of philosophy. If you didn't know, now you know. Later on, they went ahead and they branched. And before philosophy, we always had religion. We had Christianity. I think Christianity and philosophy existed together. And also, I think in some way, dogmatism was always there, right? So that time, during the ancient times when the people believed Earth was flat, it was because the church and the Pope made it to happen so, right? The church convinced the people. The church convinced the people of those times that the earth was flat, and anyone who dared to say the opposite, or anybody who dared say something different, was an enemy of the church. So we had someone like Galileo, who came against Pope, the Pope of that time. They were friends. And Galileo Galilei said, I don't want you to lie to the people no more. I want to say the truth for what it is. I have done some mathematical equations and I have developed a formula with proof that the earth is not spherical, that the earth is not flat, it is spherical, and we don't have an angel that flaps its wings for the sunshine to be there, and then at night the angel goes to sleep. That is not so. And he proved that the earth was spherical. It is what we are being taught today because of Galileo. After that, Galileo Galilei went ahead and he was killed by the Pope of that time. That's how much powerful popes were. Yes, you wouldn't say anything other than what the Pope said. And the very church, the very church has been misused to bring about the doctrines of racism. The very church was misused by white supremacists to cultivate the narrative that we have a superior race that is superior than those other people, and because we have this, because we are superior than you, you need to serve us. You see, there is a very huge fundamental problem with what the Pope was saying at that time, because in the creation, in the biblical accounts, God created human beings. He didn't say white or black or what. Human beings were created, and he said he made them equal. We are similar to him, right? Now the Pope was saying things which are different. The Pope was lying, and he used the church to cultivate the narrative of white supremacy. Now, I want you to listen to this woman, what she's got to say. I shall get back by the end of the video, where we shall also have a deep, critical analysis. Imagine that is a van with the kids being driven that way. Okay, without further ado, let's continue watching. I shall get back with a deeper, critical analysis.
The colonial elites knew they had a problem. Black slaves and white laborers were teaming up and fighting together against the rich white guys. So they passed those slave codes I talked about last time and gave poor whites a taste of privilege and stripped away rights from black people so that they wouldn't trust each other anymore. And then they used religion to win the trust of the people that should not have trusted them at all. The real divide was between the rich and the poor, but the rich made it between black and white so that they could keep screwing everyone over while blacks and whites were feuding with each other over a few scraps. The colonial elites wanted slaves, and they weren't about to free them just because they converted to Christianity as the Europeans did. So they made laws about making sure they stayed slaves. Nice. And with that, Christianity became their primary tool to control, divide, and conquer. White Christians were told that they were God's chosen people, that their privilege was divine, that America was theirs. Black Christians, slaves, were told to obey, that their suffering made them holy, that questioning was sin. Actually, that's what I was taught too, but it didn't stick with me. And black folks didn't buy it either. I mean, they appreciated the little comfort that came from learning how to cope with being slaves, because they were slaves and they had to cope with it. They didn't have a choice. But they didn't buy that it was the whole story. They secretly built churches they called hush harbors and met at night away from the white masters. They blended African religion and Christianity. The Bible stories they focused on were about freedom, like Moses freeing the Israelites, not how to be a better slave. They preached and sang about liberation. They became religious extremists to survive. They had to be able to speak the speak of the white masters, but they needed something that fed their souls. White folks became religious extremists because it patted their egos. Fast forward to today, and now we've got two versions of Christianity. I mean, there's a billion versions of Christianity, but we've got these two that I'm going to talk about. Some black Christians locked into the fear and punishment and the need to be freed for good reason. White churches wrapped their faith around MAGA and white nationalism, and their own egos got conflated with those of the rich tricksters. They think they're part of the elite in crowd, when really they're just pointing the finger of blame in the wrong direction again. Next time, in part 5, I'll talk about Reconstruction and what was promised and how that was stolen. Stay curious. It was 1607 when English settlers were sent by the Virginia Company of England to found Jamestown in Virginia, the first colony in the Americas. The goal of the Virginia Company was to get rich. The settlers had their own agendas like religious freedom and escaping tyranny, but the Virginia Company was their ride. 12 years later, in 1619, the first ship carrying African slaves got there. That was no coincidence. That was 1600's prime delivery, a gift from the Virginia Company. They had been watching Spain and Portugal profit from enslaved Africans for many years, since the 1400s, and they swiped their business model. They also used indentured servants. Some of my ancestors were indentured servants. But there's some disagreement about whether the African slaves were originally indentured, but it didn't really matter because they ended up being chattel. White indentured servants had contracts, and they had a shot at freedom after 4 to 7 years usually. When their time was up, they often got land or goods to help them start fresh. Black Africans were enslaved for life, and to ensure that they stayed that way, the colonists made laws about it. If your mama was a slave, you were a slave, your kids were slaves. There really wasn't a way out. But that was the plan all along, because think of the business aspects of it. Once you bought a person, you never had to buy them again. You never had to pay them except to keep them fed well enough that they didn't die. And you could breed them. It's disgusting. To make people feel okay about all this, language became peppered with things like, they're childlike and they need our guidance. Does that ring a bell with anything you might hear today? Like, they just need more discipline at home. They need stronger role models. It's all victim blaming, dog whistles, gaslighting, and it's still part of the culture. And it carries down from way the hell back then. The colonists passed laws to make sure slaves did not learn to read because an educated slave was bad for business. Fast forward to Reagan's trickle-down economics theory. That never worked when it came to wealth. The rich just hoarded their money. But racism trickles. It always has. And it can be so effective that white people don't recognize it as racism because we aren't looking for it. We're too comfortable. Get curious and follow for episode 3, when race became law, the unnatural birth of whiteness. It was a war to end slavery. Confederate landowners knew that poor whites had more in common with enslaved black people than with rich planters, and they would team up together against the planters, and that was most inconvenient. So instead of allowing this unity between the enslaved and the poor white people, they fed the poor white people a line. And that line was, you may be poor, but at least you're white. And you know the language they used. Big announcement here. The North was not perfect. While tens of thousands of black men enlisted to fight for their own freedom, the Union paid them more than half of what white soldiers made. White Union soldiers made $13 a month. Black Union soldiers made $10 a month. But $3 was automatically taken out of their monthly pay to cover uniforms. Uniforms that the white soldiers got for free. That left the black soldiers with $7 a month compared to the $13 a month the white dudes got. Well, the men of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment served for over a year without pay in protest of being discriminated against to do the same work in the same war, presumably for the same reason as the white guys. They protested and protested, and eventually Congress fixed it after years of this protesting. But even then, get this was a war being fought, presumably, they wanted to free the slaves. Well, get this. If a black soldier had been enslaved at the start of the war, they did not get a thin dime, even much later when they finally paid up for the differences in the pay that they were supposed to get. They didn't get any correction to their pay. Only black soldiers who had already been free before the war were able to collect that money. The North won the war, right? And everything was equal after that, right? It's like they taught us in school, right? Right? Not so fast. So the leaders from the North who won the war and the leaders from the South who lost the war had to sit down across the table from each other and decide, well, what does this all mean? So they said, well, we've got to do something that'll make peace, but, golly, it will be really hard to make it fair for everyone. Maybe we should just worry about the white people. That's what they did. Black rights were just too inconvenient. White people, your black neighbors know this shit. We didn't have to learn it because we didn't need to, because we were comfortable and things weren't going badly for us. How convenient. And now we have Trump because we were not paying attention. Curious. Next time, in part 6, I'll be talking about I've never owned anyone. My neighbors, as far as I know, have never been owned by anyone. But the people who say we don't owe any reparations for the Civil War are ignoring something really huge. Or maybe they just don't know. Some people already got reparations. White people. White enslavers were paid for losing their human property. The actual people who were raped, tortured, whipped, and sold, and worse, were promised land to get a fresh start after the war, but they got nothing. When slavery was abolished, Congress paid nearly $1 million, which is 30 million in today's bucks, to white enslavers as compensation for losing their property in a war they lost. If a freed person didn't hit the road fast enough, they risked being re-enslaved under new laws that were just workarounds for all these white people losing their slaves. After the Civil War ended, Union General Sherman set aside 400,000 acres of confiscated Confederate land for black families to start new lives on, up to 40 acres each. The Army loaned out mules to help them work the land. That's where the phrase 40 acres and a mule comes from. Black people were already working some of this land when Lincoln was assassinated and Andrew Johnson became president. Well, Johnson reversed the order. He gave the land back to the same Confederates who had just tried to destroy the country. The freed people were evicted. So they made all these things into crimes that were non-crimes. They were things like, if a black person didn't have a job, that was a crime. If a black person couldn't prove that they had a job, that was a crime. You could get arrested for that and a lot of other ridiculous things. But once you were in jail, you could be leased out as labor for private profit. This system of convict leasing allowed white landowners and businesses to replace slavery with something just as violent, just as profitable as slavery. No wonder there are still Confederate flags all across the South. Even after slavery was abolished, black Americans were not safe. Public lynchings became a regular threat. They were a form of terror used to keep free people in their place. They were planned events, announced in advance so everybody could attend. They were held in broad daylight. White families brought their children to watch black people being hanged, tortured, brutally murdered. It was a festival. People sold food. There were postcards made. People could buy postcards of the mutilated bodies hanging from trees and mail them in the mail or keep them as souvenirs. This country took care of Civil War criminals and punished the ones the war was supposed to free. And there was a lot more abuse I just can't fit into this video. Next time I'm going to talk about the stuff that happened in relation to the Great Depression and World War II. And then after that, I'll have one on civil rights, the era when I was growing up, how it all ties in to the racism that is part and parcel of our grand land today. White people, you especially need to get curious. Join me in this research, and you'll find that people are willing and able to come in with their education and their experience to help you learn. You just have to be open to it. We need to be willing to be uncomfortable. America began as a racist country. It ends, at least for now, the same way. We have had chances to change. We saw examples of resistance. We were given ample warnings, but we were trained to look away when things got hard or messy. I'm talking to white people. You and I were tranquilized by comfort, not to look too closely at difficult things. Black people, people of color, don't have that luxury because they were scapegoated. They had to take the blame for all of our problems, as relatively minor as they were and are. We have the luxury of wondering why the hell black people won't just let it go. They never get a break from it. From the very beginning, power in this country was protected by blame. White people were told that our struggles were caused by someone below us. Black people, indigenous people, immigrants, women, poor folks, gay folks, anyone who couldn't fight back in whatever political climate we were in at the moment. We were taught that the problem was them, that the solution was obedience, to stay in line, to trust authority, and all of their problems are because they just wouldn't do those things. They gave us comfort as a reward, and comfort is the most insidious drug there is. Who wouldn't rather take a nap than fight for every scrap of basic dignity? When things got hard, they pointed at a scapegoat. When things got tense, they told us who we should fear, and hint, it wasn't them. Then they promised to take care of it and let us go back to sleep while they built prisons and created stories to support the lies that black people just can't be trusted. And that pattern never broke. Trump did not invent it. His handlers just took advantage of it, and he shouted it at rallies like a war cry. He promised safety, status, and someone else to blame. He promised that to white people. He wrapped it in an American flag and sold it as salvation, and millions of us bought it twice. We didn't have to be tricked into voting for a white supremacist. We've been doing that for years, for centuries. It's what we do. This is the country we built, and we carefully branded it as the best and the greatest, even though we never had the courage to look closely enough to see the many men behind the curtain. This is where that story leads. But stories can be rewritten, and that is the work we have to do now. It's not about pretending that we're better than this. At this moment, we are not better than this. We are this. To become better than this, we have to do things that are not comfortable. Seeking the truth is hard. Choosing integrity means making conscious decisions every damn day not to blame the wrong people because someone else's finger is pointing in their direction. It means looking at that pointing finger and at who is pointing it and how they benefit from the blaming of innocent people. It means choosing every day to look for truth and not scapegoats. If you watched this whole series, thank you. Sit with it, share it, talk about it, especially if you're white, especially if it made you uncomfortable. Get curious, stay curious, and don't go back to sleep.
So guys, now back to the topic of the church and the role of the church in instigating racism. I told you that the church itself, the Roman church, the Catholic church in itself had instilled a lot of ideologies to the mind of the believers of that time. Anything the Pope said was the truth. The Pope was like God and other humans were like his creations. You understand? And also, if you are someone who follows up with history, you understand that the first church was the Catholic Church. After that, we had some other church that demonstrated. The churches which demonstrated against the Catholic Church, against the regime, are called the Protestants, right? So even the church itself was facing backlashes. The church itself was having internal conflicts, right? So the role of instigating racism was also a role that was rebuked by some of these churches, other churches that branched from Catholicism, with whom we call them the Protestants, right? They were protesting against the policies of the church. Right? Now, the church is supposed to be a sanctuary. The church is supposed to be a place of welcome. A church is supposed to be a place of accommodation, right? Because there is also a verse that says, come to me, you who are heavily laden, right? Come to me, you who are heavily laden, I shall give you rest. That is what the church should do. But the church in America during those times became a hotspot. It became a terror bed. For what? For racism, right? Because they believed in some way or the other that Jesus was white, the angels are white, and they believe that the devil is black. Well, they don't say the devil is black, but they say that Jesus is white. So they even want to place Jesus into their own pocket. You see, that one was going to be a problem, because now they have to come and believe in some other philosophy or some other school of thought where we have the children of Ham. Black people are called the descendants of Ham, and you know Ham is one of the sons of who? Noah. He looked at his father's nakedness and his father cursed him, right? So those people with that kind of school of thought, they believe that Africans are cursed and Africans need to be ruled by Japheth and Shem. Shem and Japheth were brothers to Ham. So in Noah's curse, he told Ham, you will serve your brothers. So that school of thought, you see how it originates, you see how the Bible has been constructed to fit the narrative of the colonialist, of the racist, of the slave masters? Yes. Now, after making the Bible their whole normative cultural narrative, right? The nominal cultural narrative, the whole world believes that. We even, astonishingly, we even black people, if it's not for the decolonization of one's mind, we believe that indeed we are cursed and indeed we are built to serve Japheth and Shem, with whom the white people call themselves Japheth and they call the Asians Shem. There is no such a thing as a Bible. As in the Bible is true, the Bible is equity, and the church has been misused by people who have selfish agendas, people who are selfish in themselves, and they really don't care about the affairs of other people. That is my thought, and that is my interpretation of these videos. If you have any thoughts or other interpretation, share your thoughts on the comment section. I really love to hear what you have to say. Yes. Without further ado, let's dive into another one. Or rather, let's have a subscribe. I'll surely appreciate it. Let's have a subscription. See you in the next one.